Fighters, it's Wednesday, it's Sarah, and I've just finished reading The Secret Commonwealth of Elves, Fauns, and Fairies by Robert Kirk, along with a couple of other things. The Secret Commonwealth is a treatise on basically Scottish mythology and folklore written by Robert Kirk, who was a Scottish pastor in the 1600s. This was written, I believe it was about the mid-late 1600s sometime. And I feel I should mention that there is also an introduction in here by Andrew Lang, because the actual essay, this is how thick the book is, this is how much of it is the actual essay. All of this is the introduction. That's half the book. Andrew Lang published a series of books, the color fairy books. I'm not sure what they're called exactly as a group. Like the red fairy book, the violet fairy book, and all of that. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I might talk about it a bit more later because it kind of ties into the questions. I said I read some other things this week, which is true. And so this week I read Twilight. Not this Twilight. This Twilight is terrible. But rather, this Twilight. It's a Buffy the Vampire Slayer graphic novel. It's the penultimate trade issue of Season 8 of Buffy, which I greatly enjoy this series. I don't read a lot of comic books. Basically, I read them if they're based off of something else that I like this, or Serenity, or whatever. I would talk about the cover art, except I don't want to show you the cover art. So my spiel for the cover art for this week: don't put spoilers in your cover art. Seriously, it's annoying. Especially then when there's someone like me who waits to actually read them until they come out in trade so that they can sit on a bookshelf nicer and not spend the money twice. And then manages to somehow very carefully avoid spoilers until she goes to actually order the trade, and then she sees the cover and is like, thanks a lot. So yeah, no spoilers on the covers. That's just annoying. I also was at Barnes & Noble, and I got a whole bunch of leather-bound copies of classic literature. I got a couple other ones that I don't feel like bringing over here, but this one is the complete works of Shakespeare, and I started reading King Henry VI Part 1, but I only got into about Act 2, and then I got bored with it, because there are a lot of, I don't know. I generally enjoy Shakespeare, but I didn't like this one so much. I'm going to continue reading it. I don't know that I'm going to continue reading it next week, but I will read it at some point. For next week, I will be reading Fantasties by George MacDonald. Yeah. Okay, so, the questions. Dan's question was about reading critically and meaning in our nano novel. I think I got that right. So, on the reading critically thing, I kind of disagree with both what Dan said and with what John Green said, but I also agree with both of them. That makes sense! Yeah, essentially, I think that we all read critically for different reasons. So, like, John Green reads critically to learn about others. Dan reads critically to learn about himself. I read critically to learn about the world and how people perceive the world. And mice, you are being incredibly loud right now. I feel like I'm Lauren yelling at Ninja, or Katie yelling at Infamous, except I don't want these. Anyway, so yeah, that's my thoughts on that. And for my nano, I do have some great meaning to it planned, which is pretty much all that I have. I've been doing a lot of planning, and I have a basic idea of my characters, and I know the premise, and I know where I need it to end up, but I have no idea what the plot is, which scares me. So the key thing that I have is this idea that my novel will be about death and the interconnectedness of humanity, and for whom the bells toll. And yeah, this great message of death and the interconnectedness of humanity will be told using fairies as all of the lead characters. Yes, Dan, they're not just sidekicks. Because fairies are not always the little pixie, cute, bright, sparkly things. That's more the Victorian interpretation of fairies, which isn't really accurate to the mythology. These fairies, they're more like the Fae, which they're human-sized. They're kind of, in many ways, they're similar to elves. But they're not elves, they're fairies. They don't necessarily have wings. Of the trooping fairies, that is, they're frequently divided into the Seelie court and the Unseelie court. Which the Seelie is the good or benevolent fairies, even though fairy morality is very different from human morality, so what's good for them is still not too good for us. And then the Seelie is the evil or malevolent court. The Unseelie, I mean. Yeah, the Seelie court, even though they're the good ones, they will still steal stuff from you, cause you to have all kinds of ailments if you annoy them, and they will capture your newborn infants and replace them with a grotesque changeling that you think is your child, and then you're like, oh, it's this scary, freaky, evil monster thing. And your real child will be sacrificed in a tithe to hell, apparently. Those are the good ones. Yeah, so basically, there's a lot of variety, even within, when you say fairies. There are the pixies, there are the fae, there are Grindylows and Redcaps. Yes, those actually exist outside of Harry Potter. There are hags and all kinds of stuff. There's even a creature, I forget what her name is, or what she's called, but she's essentially a Scottish vampire who's a fairy, and she drinks human blood. So, yeah, I'm Team Fairy, in case you didn't get that from there. I love elves, they're awesome and cool, but yeah, I'm Team Fairy. So I was having a conversation the other day with one of my IRL friends about the devaluation of art based upon its commodification, which is essentially the notion that art created for a commercial purpose is made less valuable than art created purely for art's sake. This occurs because culture tends to conflate spiritual value, originality, and market value. For instance, a fine artist could do a painting and have their work sold in a gallery for thousands of dollars, while a commercial artist will get paid a commission for doing their work, but their work doesn't have the same spiritual value to the culture a lot of times than the more highbrow gallery art does. And there are often times that people look down on an artist because they're making money, because they're doing something that someone has hired them to do, rather than something that they simply come up with all their own. This got me to thinking about how oftentimes a book which is a great commercial success, sometimes there's a perception that it's looked down upon as being less serious literature, or even not necessarily based on its commercial success, but simply the genre that it's in, is looked down upon as being less serious than other types of literature. So my question for you this week is, do you think that a similar phenomenon happens in literature? And whether or not you think that this occurs, do you think that, hypothetically speaking, it does occur, that it is justified, that art, or rather writing in this case, created purely for its own sake, is necessarily higher value, and something created for a commercial purpose is necessarily lower value? And I'm not saying necessarily monetary value, but even just perceived spiritual value. Yeah. And I am running out of time, and I have a bunch of other stuff that I have to get done tonight, so I am going to answer that question in my video next week. So, yeah. Katie, I will see you tomorrow.